I wasn't invited to Christmas this year. I didn't even realize it at first. You know how it is. You just assume certain things will happen because they always have. I figured the kids would call. We'd talk about who's bringing what. Maybe argue a little over the ham versus turkey situation like always. But the call never came. And when December rolled in, the silence felt louder than any snowstorm outside. I tried to tell myself maybe they were just busy. My daughter Lisa has 3 kids of her own now. My son Derek works long hours, and his wife runs some kind of online thing I never quite understand. I thought maybe they were just late in making plans. But when I saw Lisa's Christmas tree photos on Facebook, the whole family in matching red pajamas, my grandkids grinning in front of a fireplace I'd never seen before, that's when it hit me. I wasn't there. There wasn't even a "wish you were here, Mom" in the caption. Just hearts and snowflake emojis and comments from people saying how beautiful her family looked. I stared at the screen for a long time, wondering if maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they planned a second get-together, a small dinner after the main one, just for me. But deep down, I knew better. Christmas had always been my thing. I was the one who baked the pies, who hung stockings by the stairs, who insisted on the same worn-out carols playing in the background. I used to watch my kids' faces light up when I turned on the tree lights. I thought those were the moments they'd remember. I thought I mattered in that way. That night, I sat by my small fake tree, the same one I've used since moving into this little apartment. I had half a cup of cocoa, no marshmallows. Forgot to buy them this year. The heater rattled like an old friend with bad lungs, and the silence sat heavy in the room. I tried to keep busy the next morning, wrapped a few gifts for the neighbors' kids. Just small things, coloring books and candy canes. I've always liked doing that. Their mom, Jenny, is a single parent who moved in last year. She's sweet, always says hello, always offers to shovel my walkway, even when I tell her not to bother. She reminds me of myself at her age. Tired, but still trying to make everything right. Around noon, I heard laughter next door, the kind that floats through walls, warm and careless. I smiled, but it made my chest ache. I sat on my couch, turned on one of those Hallmark Christmas movies. You know, the ones where everything smells like cinnamon and forgiveness. I didn't cry at first, but then a scene came on. A mother hugging her grown daughter after years apart, and something in me cracked. I realized that for the first time in my entire life, I didn't have anywhere to go for Christmas, not because of weather or sickness or anything like that, but because no one asked me to come. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. I almost didn't get up. I figured it was just someone delivering mail to the wrong unit again. But when I opened it, there stood Jenny, her 2 kids bundled up in scarves, holding a tray covered with foil. "Merry Christmas, Miss Evelyn," she said, her smile brighter than the lights outside. I tried to smile back. "Well, Merry Christmas to you too, sweetheart. What brings you by?" She held up the tray. "We made too many cookies. The kids thought you might like some." It wasn't just cookies. There was fudge and little chocolate truffles, and even some gingerbread men that looked like they'd been decorated during a sugar rush. Her son Danny grinned up at me, holding out a tiny one missing half an arm. "This one's for you," he said proudly. I laughed for the first time that day. "Well, he's a little broken just like me," I said, and they giggled. Jenny looked at me for a second. You know that look people give when they can sense something's wrong, but they don't want to push. Then she said, "We're just about to sit down for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a small thing. We'd love for you to join us if you're not busy." My first instinct was to say no. That's what you do when your pride gets bruised. I didn't want to feel like the sad old woman next door getting pity invitations. But there was something about her tone. Not forced, not polite, just real. So I hesitated. Then I said, "Oh, I don't want to intrude." You wouldn't be," she said quickly. "Please, Miss Evelyn, we've got plenty of food. It wouldn't feel right without you." Her daughter tugged on my sleeve. "We made extra mashed potatoes just in case you came," she said shyly. And that was it. My heart melted right there. "I suppose I could come by for a little while," I said softly. Jenny's face lit up. "Perfect! Come over whenever you're ready. We'll be waiting." When I closed the door, I stood there for a minute, holding the tray of cookies and staring at the blinking lights on my little tree. The silence didn't feel quite as heavy anymore. I went to my bedroom, pulled out the red sweater I hadn't worn in years, the one with the little embroidered snowflakes, and brushed my hair. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe Christmas wasn't lost after all. When I stepped outside that evening, the cold hit me right in the bones. The kind of chill that makes your breath visible and your joints complain. But it smelled like Christmas. You know, that mix of pine, cold air, and something baking somewhere nearby? I hadn't realized how much I missed that smell. Jenny's house was just next door, but walking up her little path with the snow crunching under my boots felt like stepping into another world. Her windows glowed warm with golden light, and I could see silhouettes moving inside. Laughter, hands passing dishes, someone chasing the dog away from the table. I stood on her porch for a moment, brushing off my coat and trying to steady myself. My fingers hovered over the doorbell, but before I could press it, the door flew open. "There you are," Jenny said, her face bright with joy. "We were just about to start." She reached out, took my arm gently and guided me inside. The smell hit me first. Roasted chicken, cinnamon, and something cheesy. I didn't realize how hungry I was until that moment. Her house wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. The tree in the corner was crooked, and a few ornaments hung too low. But it was perfect in the kind of way that comes from love, not money. The kids were sitting at the table, their faces red from excitement. "Miss Evelyn's here," they shouted. They'd set an extra plate for me. I don't know why, but that small detail almost made me tear up. I hadn't sat at a Christmas table since before my husband passed. At least not one that felt like this. Real, alive, full of noise. I sat down, and Jenny poured me a glass of cider. "I hope you're okay with chicken instead of turkey," she said. "We're on a budget this year." "Sweetheart," I said with a little laugh. "Chicken's perfect. I'm just glad to be here." The kids passed around bowls of mashed potatoes and green beans. Danny handed me the gravy boat with both hands, serious like he was holding gold. I noticed the mismatched plates, the chipped serving spoon, the napkins folded in little triangles that didn't quite match. It reminded me of my own kitchen years ago. Imperfect, but full of love. We said grace. Well, Jenny said it while the kids fidgeted. And then everyone started eating. I could feel the warmth coming back to me, not just from the food, but from the laughter bouncing off the walls. They asked me about Christmases when I was little, and I told them stories about the 1950s, about my mother making fruitcake no one liked, but everyone pretended to, about my father trying to fix tangled lights every single year. Danny thought it was hilarious that we used to put tinsel on everything. Was it real silver? He asked, wide-eyed. Not quite, I said, laughing, but we thought it was magic. For a while, I forgot that my family hadn't called. I forgot about the Facebook photos and the quiet apartment waiting next door. I just sat there, surrounded by people who weren't even related to me, but somehow made me feel more seen than my own blood. After dinner, Jenny brought out dessert, a small pie that she admitted came from the grocery store freezer section. "It's nothing fancy," she said, embarrassed. "It's perfect," I told her. And I meant it. When she cut the pie, her daughter whispered something to her. Jenny smiled and turned to me. "Evelyn, the kids wanted to give you something." I blinked, confused. "Oh, honey, you didn't have to..." Before I could finish, Danny handed me a small box wrapped in crinkled red paper. It wasn't neat, Too much tape on one side, barely any on the other. I took it carefully, my hands trembling just a little. "Open it," he said, bouncing on his toes. Inside was a tiny ornament, a glass snowflake, clear and delicate. Attached to it was a small tag that said, "To Miss Evelyn, our Christmas neighbor." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat closed up and all I could do was nod. "It's beautiful," I finally whispered. "Thank you, sweetheart." Jenny looked at me, her eyes soft. "You've been so kind to us since we moved here," she said. "The kids adore you. You're part of our little family, whether you like it or not." And that did it. The tears I'd been holding back all day finally came. Not the sad kind. The kind that comes when your heart's been cracked open by something good and unexpected. I laughed through the tears and said, "Well, I guess I better bring cookies next year." Then, "You better," Jenny said, laughing too. We spent the rest of the evening playing board games. The kids taught me one I didn't understand but pretended to win anyway. There was more laughter, more stories, and by the time I finally went home, it was almost midnight. When I stepped outside, the snow had started falling again. Big, soft flakes that glowed in the light from their porch. I stood there for a while, holding the little ornament in my hand. It sparkled even in the dark. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like Christmas had passed me by. It just looked a little different than I expected. I went back inside my apartment, hung the ornament on my tiny tree, and turned off all the lights except that one. The snowflake caught the glow and made it dance across my walls. I whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas," and smiled. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight was faint, slipping through the curtains like it wasn't sure if it belonged there. For a few seconds I just lay in bed, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the soft ticking of the wall clock. Then I remembered. Last night actually happened. It wasn't a dream. Jenny's laughter, the kids' little voices, the smell of chicken and cinnamon. It all came back to me in pieces, like warm snapshots in my mind. I smiled, pulling the blanket closer around my shoulders. My chest felt lighter, softer, almost like something heavy had been lifted off it. I got up, shuffled into my slippers, and made myself a cup of tea. When I sat down by the window, I saw the neighborhood covered in white. Every rooftop, every tree branch, wrapped in snow like the world had been cleaned overnight. Across the yard, Jenny's house stood still, with little trails of footprints leading from the porch to the sidewalk. For years, Christmas morning had been the loneliest day of the year for me. I'd sit in that same spot pretending the quiet didn't hurt, pretending I didn't notice the sounds of families laughing next door, or the car doors slamming as people left to visit loved ones. But that morning was different. I wasn't pretending anymore. I looked at the tiny Christmas tree in the corner of my living room. The little glass snowflake ornament caught the light again, sparkling like it was winking at me. I picked it up gently and turned it in my hand. The tag still hung from it. "To Miss Evelyn, our Christmas neighbor." That small gift meant more than any expensive present could have. It wasn't about what it cost. It was about what it said. It said, "You matter." It said, "We see you." I realized something sitting there. Sometimes love doesn't come from where we expect it. Sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes it's just people who show up when you least expect them to. After finishing my tea, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Bake. My late husband, George, used to love my cinnamon rolls. I hadn't made them since he passed. The smell used to make me sad, like opening a box of old memories that were too heavy to carry. But that morning I wanted that smell again. I wanted my house to feel alive. So I took out the old recipe card, yellowed at the edges, written in my mother's cursive handwriting. I tied on my apron, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. Flour dusted the counter. The dough stuck to my fingers. I laughed at myself when I spilled sugar on the floor. It wasn't perfect. The rolls came out a little uneven. But when the smell filled the house, something in me healed a little. While they baked, I heard a knock at the door. It was Jenny. Her hair was messy, her cheeks red from the cold, and she was holding a plate covered with foil. "Good morning, Miss Evelyn," she said, smiling. "We made extra pancakes. The kids insisted you needed some." "Oh, sweetheart," I said. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, laughing. "But we wanted to." I let her in, and we sat at the table together. Her with her plate of pancakes, me with my cinnamon rolls. She took one bite and said, "Okay, these are incredible. You're definitely making these again next year." I laughed. "We'll see. Only if I get invited to Christmas dinner again." She looked at me, serious for a second, and said, "Evelyn, you don't need an invitation. You're part of us now." That sentence, it hit something deep inside me. For years, I'd been waiting for my family to say those words, to make me feel included, wanted. And here was this young woman who owed me nothing, saying exactly what I needed to hear. The rest of the morning passed softly. Her kids came over later with their new toys, showing me every button, every light. I laughed so much my cheeks hurt. I hadn't realized how much joy children could bring just by being themselves. When they left that afternoon, the house went quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful, full. I sat by the window again and watched the snow melt in slow patterns. Cars passed by, and I saw people coming home from their own gatherings, some smiling, some tired, some alone. I thought about how many of them might feel the same way I did yesterday morning, invisible, forgotten. And I wished I could tell them, "You're not invisible. You just haven't been seen by the right people yet." That night, I got a text from my daughter. It said, "Mom, sorry we didn't invite you. Things got complicated." That was it. No explanation. No phone call. Just that. For a few minutes, I stared at the message, unsure what to feel, but then I smiled, because I realized I didn't need that apology to feel whole. Not anymore. I replied, "It's okay, honey. I hope you had a beautiful Christmas." And I meant it. Then I turned off my phone, made myself another cup of tea, and sat down in the glow of the Christmas lights. The snowflake ornament shimmered on the tree again, catching every bit of light like it refused to stop shining. I whispered, "Thank you, Jenny," even though she couldn't hear me. And then, "Thank you, God," because sometimes, when we lose one thing, we're quietly being led to something better. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. I hadn't done that in decades. It said, "Dear Evelyn, you thought Christmas was about being remembered, but this year, you learned it's about remembering others. Keep your heart open. The world needs it." I folded it neatly and tucked it into the ornament box. Maybe next year when I unpack the decorations, I'll read it again and smile. A few days passed after Christmas, and life began to slip back into its quiet rhythm. The decorations around the neighborhood started coming down, one house at a time. The air felt different, colder somehow, but also calmer. I'd always dreaded the days after Christmas because they made the silence in my house echo louder. But this time, it didn't echo. There was still warmth in the air, not from the heater, but from the memories that had been made. Jenny stopped by again 2 days later with her daughter, Lily. She brought over a jar of hot cocoa mix tied with a red ribbon. "We made it ourselves," she said proudly, handing it to me like it was treasure. I smiled and said, "Well, I think it's the best gift I've ever gotten." Lily giggled, her front tooth missing, and hugged my leg before running back to her mom. "It's funny. I'd lived next door to them for years, but I never really knew them until this Christmas. I'd seen their lives in pieces through the window. Birthdays, barbecues, laughter spilling out into the summer air. But now, I was part of those moments, not just a bystander looking in." Over the next few weeks, Jenny and I found small reasons to visit each other. Sometimes it was her bringing over leftovers. Sometimes it was me sharing an extra loaf of bread. Other times it was just a knock on the door and a simple, "You doing okay today?" Those small gestures meant more than anyone could guess. I had spent so many years thinking I was invisible, that people just didn't see me anymore, because I was older, slower, less involved. But Jenny didn't look past me. She looked at me. She saw me as someone who still had value, who still had stories worth listening to. One day in January, she asked me if I wanted to join her for Sunday dinner. "Nothing fancy," she said. "Just meatloaf and mashed potatoes." I told her I'd think about it. Old habits die hard, you know. After so many years of being alone, part of me was scared to let people in again. It's like you build these walls to protect yourself, and then when someone knocks, you hesitate to open the door because you're not sure if they'll stay. But that Sunday, I did go. I wore my blue sweater, the one my late husband used to say made my eyes shine, and I walked next door with a plate of homemade cookies. Dinner was simple but warm. Jenny's husband, Mark, told bad jokes that made everyone laugh. The kids kept asking me questions about the old days, and I told them stories about how we used to wait for Christmas snow with excitement instead of checking weather apps. For the first time in a long while, I felt like part of something real. Later that evening when I came home, I stood by the window and watched their family through the glass as they cleaned up the dishes together. I should have felt like an outsider, but I didn't. I felt full. I felt content. The next morning, I got another message from my daughter. "Mom, how was your Christmas?" She wrote. It was simple, almost awkward, like she didn't know what to say. I hesitated before replying. I thought about telling her how I spent it, about the laughter, the cinnamon rolls, the way Jenny's kids made me feel alive again. But instead, I just wrote, "It was lovely, honey. I hope yours was too." A few minutes later, she replied, "I'm glad. Maybe next year we'll celebrate together." I didn't cry, but I did sit quietly for a long time staring at those words. I knew better than to get my hopes up, but even a small message like that felt like sunlight breaking through a crack in the clouds. As the months went by, Jenny's family became my family in all the ways that mattered. When spring came, she brought me flowers from her garden. In the summer, I helped her can peaches for the first time. I hadn't done that since my kids were little. The smell of boiling fruit and sugar filled the kitchen, and I found myself humming, not even realizing it until she started humming along. "See?" she said with a smile. "You bring the music, Miss Evelyn." I laughed. "Oh, I don't know about that. It's been a long time since I had any music left in me." "Well," she said softly, "I think you just forgot the tune." Her words stuck with me. Sometimes, I think life gives us second chances in quiet, ordinary ways. Not in big, dramatic moments, but in small ones. A smile, a knock at the door, a child's hug. Those are the things that stitch a heart back together, thread by thread. Then December came again. The snow returned, and with it that familiar chill in the air. But this time, I wasn't alone. Jenny and her family invited me over to help decorate their tree. Her husband lifted Lily up so she could place the star on top. The baby giggled from his high chair while we hung ornaments. When it came time to open gifts, Jenny handed me a small box. I opened it carefully, and inside was a frame. A photo of all of us from last year's Christmas dinner. Written underneath were the words, "Our Christmas family." A breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes stung, but I didn't want to cry. Not because I was sad, but because I was overwhelmed by the beauty of it. Jenny reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're part of us, Evelyn," she said softly. I finally found my voice and whispered, "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." But she did. She really did. When I went home that night, I placed the photo on my mantle next to an old picture of my husband. 2 pieces of my life, the past and the present, sitting side by side. And for the first time in so many years, I didn't feel torn between them. I just felt grateful. As I turned off the lights and walked to my bedroom, I caught one last glimpse of that photo, the glow from the Christmas lights reflected off the glass, making it sparkle. I smiled to myself and whispered, "Merry Christmas, George." I'm okay now. I like to think he heard me. Winter passed, and before I knew it, another year had come and gone. Funny how time slips away faster as you get older, like the days start running instead of walking. The snow melted, the flowers bloomed, and summer drifted by in a quiet, golden haze. But through it all, Jenny and her family remained a part of my life. I wasn't just the lady next door anymore. I was Miss Evelyn, the one who always had cookies ready, the one who told stories about the olden days, the one who laughed with them on the porch during warm evenings. Every Sunday, without fail, Jenny would bring me coffee. Sometimes we'd talk for hours about nothing, recipes, books, how fast the kids were growing. Other times we'd just sit in silence, the kind that's comfortable because it means you're not alone. I didn't realize how much that mattered until one morning I woke up and saw a card slipped under my door. It was from Lily. On the front, she'd drawn a stick figure family holding hands. There was Jenny, Mark, the baby, Lily, and me. Right in the middle, on the back in her crooked handwriting, it said, "You're my Christmas grandma. I don't think I've ever cried so quietly in my whole life. You know, for years I prayed for my own family to remember me, to call, to visit, to just see me. But somewhere along the way, I realized something important. Family isn't only the people who share your blood. It's also the ones who share your table, who share your time, who open their doors without asking for anything in return." Jenny didn't replace my children. She reminded me that love doesn't end when someone forgets you. It just finds a new way to show up. Last Christmas, she asked me to come early and help her bake. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter, and we laughed about the first time she tried to make my apple pie recipe and burned the crust. I caught her looking at me with that same kindness I saw the first night she knocked on my door. "I'm glad you came over that night," she said. I smiled. "Me too. I didn't realize it then, but you saved me, Jenny." She shook her head. "No, Evelyn, you saved me. You reminded me what kindness looks like." We didn't say anything after that. We just kept baking, the snow falling softly outside. That evening, her family, our family, as they called it, gathered around the table. There were candles, laughter, and the same warmth I used to feel when my kids were little. And for a moment, I forgot all the lonely holidays that came before. All I could feel was love. Later that night, I went home and sat by the window again. The lights from Jenny's house twinkled through the snow, just like they did that first Christmas when I thought I'd been forgotten. Only now, they didn't make me ache. They made me grateful. I thought about calling my daughter again. It had been months since we'd spoken. I wasn't angry anymore, just peaceful. I picked up the phone, but before I could dial, I stopped. Not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because for the first time in a long while, I didn't need to. I had found peace without needing anyone to give it to me. Still, I whispered a quiet prayer for her, for all of them. I hoped they were happy. I hoped they were warm. I hoped maybe someday, when they looked back, they'd remember me not with guilt or pity, but with love. And if they didn't, well, that was okay too, because I had found something better than being remembered. I had found connection. When I lay down that night, I looked at the photo frame on my nightstand, the one Jenny gave me. Our Christmas family. I reached out and touched the glass lightly, smiling to myself. Life doesn't always go how we think it should. Sometimes the people you love drift away. Sometimes you get left out. Sometimes you sit by the window and watch the world go on without you. But if you keep your heart open, just a little, someone, somewhere might walk in and remind you that it's not over yet, that there's still warmth waiting for you. Because kindness has a way of finding us, even when we least expect it. So, if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt forgotten, please know you're not alone. Somewhere out there, someone is thinking of you. And maybe, just maybe, your story isn't over yet. And if my story touched you, even just a little, then I'd love for you to do one small thing before you go. Take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who might need a little hope this season. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, stories about love, loss, and the little miracles that still happen, please subscribe to the channel. Because even when life forgets to invite you, there's always a seat waiting here for you. Always.